Testing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Superintendent Jake Langlis. Sitting next to me is Assistant Superintendent Karen Paquette, and we have some supports in the audience here to help us look things up if we need to. I just talk louder. Can you hear me? Shouts back in. So the plan tonight is to go through a slideshow with just some information on it, but we can also pull up other information, but really want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have, hear a little bit more about the budget and process. Really just try to use an open format so that you have an opportunity to just ask anything you can. If we have the answer, we'll get it to you on the spot. If we need to go get it, we will find a way to get it and post it back out to you. We want people to be as informed as possible before tomorrow's referendum. So without further ado, I will start. Feel free to say louder at any point in time, and I will do my best to speak back up. So just walking up to this, as you know, we've had two budget referendums that have not passed to date. And we also, sorry, we've had two budget referendums not passed to date, and the third one will be tomorrow. I do want to share up front that the further we go along in this process, the more we will get to a place where, regardless of a community vote, we will have to freeze or pause things, because if we don't have an approved budget, we have to anticipate that we can't move forward with certain things. That's a discussion I would have with our administrative team if necessary, and we're just hoping that it's not necessary. While we can't tell people how to vote, I think people know how I feel, and I'll continue to work through the process to the best of my ability. So I want to start with our themes and goals. This is something we talk about going all the way back to December. This is work that we did with community, with staff over the last 2 years, getting input. We want to make sure that we're improving instruction systematically, improve our special education structure to improve programming, grow pathways to graduation, maintain equity, social, emotional, and coping skills development efforts, school safety, and district-wide stability and good communication. Quick recap, LPS programming in 10 different buildings. We're doing a rollover right now. I tried to get accurate numbers, but please bear with me. If you do the math on these, they may not add up to our total enrollment, because this time of year is when we go from last year's data to this year's data. We still have to correct some things and move some students. But we have 10 different buildings. This is a separate site here, obviously the Green Ladle connected to LRTC. We didn't list that separately, but just as a note, we have 5 elementary schools, our middle school, our high school, Longley building, and technical center programming. We also have the Dingley building, which is our central office over on 36 Oak Street, and adult education programming, which we don't count when we share our enrollments as Lewiston Public Schools, but they did serve over 1,700 adult students this year, this past school year. As a note, we talk about how many staff do we have. Oftentimes, I got a number today from HR. We have 980 staff, but that's including adult education educators. It does not include our pool of substitutes. We do have a big pool of substitutes that helps our schools function. I just want to be upfront that the number of staff that we have can sometimes sound bigger, but a lot of that is part-time staff who helps here and there as substitutes. Just some challenges and factors, and if you've seen other presentations, I apologize. Some of this is just a recap. The state of Maine subsidy formula has provided Lewiston over $73 million in funding. That's built around what we know as the ED 279, which is the essential programs and services metric that the state uses to develop how we're funded. And there are different ratios in there that help us provide services and education to our students that focus on specialized areas like special education, like multilingual learners. How many, administrators should you have? How many special educators they think you need? How many school counselors there should be? It's all built into this metric, and that helps inform that number of $73,171,999. And again, that includes special education. The general ed funding is a little less than that. But a lot of people don't realize when we ask for a referendum here at the local level, how much are we asking for? Well, we're asking for the difference of that 73 and our total budget. That is what is locally funded using that tax base. We've also expanded our career and technical education programs into Auburn. For people like me, that's a conversation that's ongoing. We seem to always want students to have more experiences like what we have for our trades programming, business programming, medical health professionals, and we've expanded to the new high school in Auburn. And Auburn has those programs on their site, but they are overseen and conducted through Lewiston Public Schools because we are a regional center, and that's just how the CTE funding works. There are multilingual supports. Actually looked up a number today because someone asked a question, but in our EPS formula, we have roughly $6 million that comes to Lewiston Public Schools directly for multilingual supports. We're also supporting a lot of high need students in our community. And we'll talk more about special education programming because we currently tuition a number of students elsewhere, and we're hopeful to bring more and more of those students home so they can go to school with their peers in a less restrictive environment. And also, in the long run, as we build these programs, we seek to save Lewiston taxpayers some money. One of the tricky pieces with this is if we don't invest in the programming while we pay for some kids to be tuitioned, we'll never cross the bridge where we can save dollars. And if we don't invest, we have to pay those dollars because we have to provide the services no matter what. Our facilities have some needs that we must address, and the capital improvement funding that we work through with bonding by way of the city does help us address some of those facility needs. But if you follow municipal meetings, our city meetings, there's a lot of things that we can't just fund. So we are still looking for ways to make sure that our roofs don't leak too much. McMahon roofs being replaced currently, or portions of it, and that we can make sure we maintain safe environments for our kids. Last year, the budget was reduced by 61 positions. We're unable to repeat that this year. Much of that was based on some reviews that we had done internally once we came out of COVID to see what we could reduce by, and we've done that work. We're able to function this year with, again, those 61 less positions, but that's more efficient than with the prior budget, obviously, but those positions created fund balance in prior years. So because we've reduced them, that's 61 positions worth of funding that we don't have in fund balance, which I think is more appropriate from a fiscal transparency perspective. But we want to be really upfront about having already reduced our staffing by that much just a little over 12 months ago. Our out-of-district cost to send students to special purpose private schools cannot continue to be absorbed by our community. It's really gotten quite expensive. We'll talk more about that, and there are some reasons why it's gotten much more expensive. We have contractual increases. We have, I believe, 8 different bargaining units here in Lewiston, and as they negotiate their contracts and get their steps and their increases, there are some cost increases with that. That is a standard thing. Once those contracts are collectively bargained, we live by them and honor them to the best of our ability. Inflation's hitting everybody. I don't have to talk too much about that, but certainly school costs are facing the same pieces. Healthcare costs. So this is more about fringe. So this is the cost of things like someone's family insurance. If they're our employee and they take insurance through us, the healthcare industry sets a rate each year. Some years it's a small increase. Some years it's flat, and some years it's much bigger. So we budget for that, but we get our actual cost in around April. And so that's when we can put that in the budget. We also, I have school resource officers up here because there's been a pretty, I think, well-supported discussion around resource officers in our schools. We currently have 3. There was a proposal to add 2 more that was reduced to 1, and the latest is reduced that as well. It's hard to reduce by a staff who helps students know how to read and fund law enforcement. But we speak for myself, very supportive of school resource officers in our schools, and we continue to look for grants to try to make that happen one way or the other. There's also been some Maine leave law changes that are not in place yet, but there's a process where we're building a pool of funds as a state, and there's some costs associated with that. I'll talk more about. Not necessarily this year, but it's starting to have financial implications. Child Development Services, or CDS as it's come to be known, is moving from a state region model to a local school model. It's a 3-year transition plan that's coming into place, but we have to start thinking about it because of our size, because we do not have the space to house additional students in that respect, or provide the services that's needed. And we also have space concerns overall, and more projected with, if you've seen that in our community, many more living spaces, apartments, mixed use, lots of things being built right now in Lewiston, which is exciting for a number of reasons. But when we're looking at hundreds of new units, I see hundreds of potential new students. And so not all of those spaces will be families that have students, but I'm sure some will, and I'm sure some will have more than one student. I'm not going to go through the whole list. We did share this out publicly here recently, but this is a list of items that have already been reduced in the budget work. For the most part, this has been since the May referendum. There's a few things that were on here from prior to. It's quite a list. Just some costs that we want to make sure we're noting. The paid family medical leave pool is something that employers are contributing to as part of the legislation that's coming through. Next year, we are required as an employer to pay 0.5% of payroll for half of the year. That's how this rollout is happening. And for us, that percentage ratio for Lewiston Public Schools is 382,000, or we figured it might be as low as 282,000, but that's a cost that we're anticipating having as part of for what I would consider to be unfunded, but we're required to do. We also have special purpose and tuition costs, and SEED, which is part of a reimbursement model for what we pay the state of Maine share of anything that's being sought after for reimbursement. We can go into more detail with that, but that's going to be over $3 million this year and anticipated to grow again next year. But overall, our budget consists of about 70% staff. And between contractual obligations and insurance and fridge changes that are a bit beyond our control, that equates to around $6 million in change just going from last year to this coming school year. So just the 2 segments above, if you do some quick math, it accounts for about $10 million worth of change just because we hit July 1. The current budget that's proposed is requesting an overall $8.5 million increase locally. And it's $1.5 million less than the unfunded cost increase of $10 million. And when I use the words unfunded, I don't want to push back at anyone. I think our representatives at the state level do an excellent job trying to support Lewiston schools and students and the community as a whole. But there are some things that we want that we have to pay for. One of those things is, again, philosophically, I think teachers should be paid better. I think it's a hard job. I think it can be thankless at times, but they're doing, I think, saints work, and they could be compensated more. But when you pay people more, you have to figure out how you're going to pay people more. So you want this thing to try to attract people to the field and keep good people around and compensate them fairly, but you have to raise the money to do that. But I do want to note that bottom line is what we're asking for here locally is less than the increase that is beyond our control. So that's how we have to face those reductions. We have to find a way to close the gap. Special education, and Director Crafts may come up to the podium here for a minute. But I want to talk more about least restrictive environment, access to the larger school community, including unified arts, so your music, your arts classes, some of your hands-on STEM classes, multilingual services, and unified sports. That a special purpose private school, when a kid gets on a bus or a van in the morning and goes to Saco, for example, to go to a special purpose school, they're not going to have access to some of the things that we can provide. And that includes a long ride that's expensive. And they don't get to see the kids that they go to school with, or excuse me, and that they see in their neighborhood when they're around home. And so we are looking at bringing these students back home more and more. It also allows them access to multidisciplinary teams. And the interesting thing about these bottom pieces, speech, OT, PT, social work, behavior analysts, we have those in our system because we have to, and they do good work. But also, if kids go to a special purpose tuition school and they, for some reason, don't have those items, we have to provide them, even though we're paying tuition for them to go elsewhere, which is not uncommon in today's labor market because there's not a lot of speech therapists out there, for example. So if they can't provide it, we are on the hook to do so. So you pay tuition, you pay reimbursement, and in some cases you have to provide services because they don't have it available. The fiscal responsibilities, again, I mentioned, and Director Kraft may touch on this more, but legally the school district is responsible regardless of the student's placement. So whether we have them here in our community or we tuition them elsewhere, we are responsible for their education. So we could take a strong stance and say, we're not going to raise money this year locally to pay for this growth of programming in-house. It'll just cost us more to send them elsewhere and pay for transportation. And what they get there, in my opinion, is not going to be as wholesome as what they would get here. Did you want to add to that slide?
I guess I think we're at a point right now where we can say that we can successfully program for students to this level. This is for section 28, which is intellectually disabled children and autism spectrum disorder, not our section 65, that is day treatment. We're looking to expand that, and there's a big difference, and there's a big difference in reimbursement rates for that as well. Under special education law, students need to be in their least restrictive environment, and this is their least restrictive environment. As long as we can program for them successfully. We've run into a lot of things this year where we don't have speech providers to send to special purpose private schools or PTs or OTs because our own kids here need services as well. And so we have been legally responsible to provide that. And if it goes to due process, that's more money we have to spend in legal fees, time that all of us in-house don't have to spend to prep and prepare. So it's just a bad place to be in. And I think with the reimbursement rates going up for section 28, we've just really gone backwards. And we're going to continue to go backwards unless we start doing something now. And the access to the larger school community, including unified arts, students will have the ability to participate in their gym classes and art and have access to things that they will not have when they're away, an hour away or 30 minutes away. They'll also receive their multilingual services for our ELL kids. They are not currently receiving those in their special purpose private schools, and they would receive those here. And they'll also have access to unified sports. And for those of you who don't know what that is when you play with gen ed peers and there's coaching and mentoring going on. It's not only great for the special ed kids, but it's also great for the regular ed kids because they develop empathy for others that have less than them. So I think it's just the right way to go. I don't know if you want to go over the cost increases at all. I know I've read a lot that sometimes we don't always see what the big numbers are. I don't know if people are interested in that, but if you look currently, we're sending, I took the names of the schools out. We're sending to 12 different schools. This was in April. We are finishing up our invoices for May and June now, so it's not up to date, but you'll see on the far right, we're projected at a 25% increase just for tuition alone due to the new mandates that happen through the state as far as having to pay when students aren't attending. They also had rate adjustments for different schools. They're trying to make it more equal so that each school is, depending on the services they're receiving, that the districts are paying what they think is fair. But in some cases, it's really hurt us because we have the most probably students in the whole state that are outplaced. So we're really feeling that right now, the strain of that.
Just some backdrop on that. The reason that there was an adjustment at the state level around this was initially we were paying, well, different schools had different rules, but most schools that were taking students for tuition would only charge you if the student attended for the day. But when attendance gets really bad, they can't project, staff, you're going to work today and not tomorrow because we can afford this. So some of these special purpose private schools were really asking for support with, is there a layer of regulation that we can put to this so that the funding is consistent so they can at least know that they can keep their doors open and pay their staff. So that was I think the quick philosophical piece of that. But as a result, it turned to potentially up to a 6% increase, but not in the tuition rate. There's a formula that created how you get to the 6%. I'm still trying to navigate that piece, but it had a lot of pieces: overhead, office staff, buildings, facility maintenance. It wasn't just your 6% on tuition. And then on top of that, we're paying every day now. So if a student is sick for a week of school, we're still paying that daily rate for that student to not attend. Again, I understand the business model and it's got to work both ways, but someone's got to pay the bill and we're getting the invoice.
So I think it's important to point out too, so that attendance rate increased at the same time that Section 28 reimbursement rates increased. So the non-attendance, we were told that was being put into place because they are not able to bill if a student doesn't attend. So there's still an issue with students being dropped when they don't attend. So that 25% increase overall, the average, coupled with the Section 28 increase, and we can go over that. I don't know if you want to go back and go to the other chart, but oh, sorry, it's the bottom one that says seed. So main care seed by the year. You'll notice from last year to this year, we were at $1.4 million. That is 33% of the reimbursement for the state portion funding of main care billing that we pay. Up to we're at about 2.2. So that in itself, just because of the rate increase for reimbursement for Section 28, cost us that much money. That's huge for a district our size. For little schools that are smaller districts, I should say, that have only a few kids that they're outplacing, it's easier to absorb that, in my opinion. Maybe not because their budgets are smaller, but this is a huge deal for us. So this is, and I think at the bottom it says it's 42% increase for our our Section 28 specialized seed cost that we're paying out. So we're paying this plus the tuition rates, which is up to 25%, plus transporting kids, which is several $100s every day per student. So that coupled all together is just a massive amount. So the reimbursement rate for main care for Section 28 went up 45% this year. So.
Plus, if they can't provide a service that's on the IEP, we are obligated to provide that.
So this is just a basic breakdown of 65 and 28. I already mentioned our day treatment programs. We currently have had a wing and big man, one at the middle school and the high school. Since COVID, post-COVID, we've had some struggles, being completely transparent. We're looking to rebuild that. We have shrunk it in size. We're going to do some specific training. This past year, we had shut down for a week to try to regroup, do TCI again, just because the kids are coming back, and it's been a struggle in the public school building or public school setting. So some of those kids we're still going to have to outplace because that's just the nature of the beast. Section 65 reimbursement is much lower than 28, so that's a good thing. And we've had a really hard time recruiting and maintaining staff for that level because it's not an easy job. So that would be primarily your emotionally disturbed children and OHI, ADHD-like disabilities. Section 28, we currently have RISE and FLS in the district in almost every single building, and we are adding CLIMB, which is the new specialized Section 28 program that will be primarily serving students with autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disabilities. Since post-COVID, we have a lot of kids struggling, especially a ton of pre-K students coming up. Every year, it's more and more and more that did not receive services when they were little because of COVID, and there just wasn't anything out there. And they really need more. So we are putting funding into that to get our own programming going. So that is what, when we talk about what we're doing, it's Section 28, intellectually disabled and autism spectrum disorder, not day treatment. So there's the difference. I know a lot of people don't understand those differences, so I thought it was important to point that out.
So we've been sharing over time as a phased approach. And so building off what Director Crash just shared, there's a space at McMahon that we are transitioning to help support what we hope is to be as many as 50 students this year. That's our goal. That's our target. And then if you look at the graphic, it's like the circles around a portion of the wing. And then the hope is then next year or over the next 2 years, it says at the bottom, year 2, 3, we expand that to 60 students with a total of 300 students being in-house instead of paying their tuition to go elsewhere. And that would be the wing of, at this point, McMahon. And then our target is to grow in-house programs by 50 students. And as we do that work, just kind of reiterate on our process and figure out what is the best way to do this from an efficiency and experience perspective for our kids. And looking at years 4, 5, 28, 29, I'm saving the district up to $3 million a year. Director Crafts thinks we can save more. I'm hopeful, but I feel safe saying we can save up to $3 million a year here locally by providing those services in-house.
I feel like I need to point out, because obviously it's very important to save money, and I want to do that, and especially for the community and the taxpayers. But I also wholeheartedly believe it is in the best interest of our students for them to have access to their gen ed peers and their community, and so that they can become integrated in it and do something after high school. We're looking at already this next upcoming year, getting transition planning going at the high school and middle school so that we can really expand that to be something that's really a great opportunity for them. So it is also in the best interest of the kids. So put that up.
So this is just kind of reiterating the point that in-house in today's dollars, my projection was that it would be around $47,000 per student to make this transition. And it includes, again, the oversight, the services, transportation savings, things like that. The special purpose private school and seed reimbursement model, I projected that to be well over $70,000 per student if we continue down that road. And it does not include all the services all the time. It does not include the transportation costs, and it does not include other needs for oversight, staff time, et cetera. And what I mean by that is every student that goes out of our district, we are responsible for their IEP. We are responsible for the arrangements and the logistical management of their to and from in their day. And so that takes staff that work here the time to invest in all of that logistical management work. And there's a lot of time certainly invested in that effort. So again, we bring all those things in-house. You can see how we can save some money per student. And I want to echo, it's for me, it's not just about the expense. It's also about the experience for kids. And I see, as you mentioned earlier, the benefit to the kids is not just, I get to go to school nearby. I get to see the kids I live near. It's kids that get to experience what it's like to help someone who might be physically disabled or intellectually or learning disabled, and have that exchange, that experience, I think is a beautiful thing. And kids should have that both ways. So, anything you want to add, Director Kress? Okay. Feel free to jump back up if you need to. Fund balance has been discussed a lot over the last couple of months. So fund balance is just, in essence, unspent dollars that were in the budget and prior budget. So it's not just last year's unspent dollars. Fund balance can be built up over multiple years. There's some irony to this, that we tried to be intentional in following the COVID relief rules, but also trying to save locally. And so in that effort, we actually built up a fund balance that might help us transition out of some of those COVID years, which we are doing. And some are perceiving that as, well, you have all this money, you should just spend it. My fear with that is, if we're spending it to create this year's budget number, and you have those contractual increases next year, and you don't have that money, you have to raise it, or you have to reduce to get to it. And so that's a challenge with fund balance. And where we're making our budgets more and more lean, which last year when we cut 61 positions, I felt real good about that, in that we were knowing what we were doing and we were looking for a way to save money and we could work through it. Uh, some of these reductions this year, I'm not in favor of, but I get it. But whenever there's less excess in next year's budget, whatever that becomes, there'll also be less excess to create fund balance the year after. So if you use it all, you don't have money to continue to do that work. So it's like kind of trying to wean off of it is the intent, so that we can reduce how much fund balance we need. If it's not there, it doesn't matter what you need. It's not available. So we're looking for people to vote. I am by rule not allowed to tell you how to vote, as I mentioned earlier. Last year our budget was 101.09 million. This year we're at 109 and a little after the reductions and changes. So with a $10 million increase and a $9 million ask, we're shrinking resources. So the 10 million was that slide that we showed you, that those are just costs that happen. I don't want to say they're fixed, but in essence, they're fixed. They don't have variables built in other than contractual growth in the future. And we're asking for 9. So there's 10 out there. We're asking for 9. There's been some other ways that we've done some things to try to reduce the burden here locally. But we're shrinking resources to a district of schools and educators and our kids that has a growing enrollment in the hundreds. And it was hundreds already, and it's going to be, again, potentially hundreds in a year or two. This budget is a $1.16 ask for an increase on the mill rate. It's smaller than last year's request that was approved by what I would say was a pretty conservative city council. It's smaller than last year's approval by 18 cents. And so we're looking for people to get out and vote and express their wishes. But voter approval is needed to keep schools open. And by keep schools open, we're not going to shut a school if this budget fails. But what we might be closing is certain programming, certain things that cost money outside the school day. Those will be things at risk that I have to look at with input from our leadership team to say, what are we not going to pay for? Because until we have a budget, I don't know what I can spend, and I'm not going to spend and not have a plan for the shortfall right after we do have a budget. We need funding to keep the buses running where we run them. And that's another after school piece. For our after school programming, we do have some grants that help limit the burden on us, but we have matching liabilities in them. So it's written right into the grant. Lewiston Public Schools will provide, and the grant will provide. And some of that is transportation. Some of that is supplies for programming. But if we don't have the funds, that's one of the things that nobody wants to say, yes, we should do that. But I have to be considering these things. That's one of the things we consider, because we also bus those students home. That's another run of buses. Every day those programs run at all the schools. So again, that might be a way to reduce costs if we don't have a budget to work off of. And I keep programs going. We do a lot of things with grants. We do a lot of things that are really great opportunities for kids. We had robots in here at the end of the school year with kids showing off what they had done with robots and software and programming. We had our robotics team compete here recently. Those are some things that they cost money. They're great experiences for kids, but they cost more. There's other things that we pay for as a school district that people may not realize, like some upper level assessments. Not all of them. Some of them are covered by grants, but things like advanced placement exams, things of that nature. We're going to have to really look at how many kids, how much does this cost? Should we be paying for them? Should we ask them to pay for them? People have brought up things like sports. We'll just put sports on there, cut them all, and make it pay to play. I'm not comfortable doing that. If the community has that wish, please make it known. Our kids struggle to buy their footwear at times. To say they got to pay to be on a team is not good for our community. So votes tomorrow, I think people know that. All the votes will be, the entire referendum will be held at Longley. This is not a citywide referendum where there's multiple locations. I think it's important for people to hear that. So at Longley School, across from the Coliseum at 145 Birch Street, the voting will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I just want to remind people that the only part of the local cost our city requires a vote for is the school budget. You don't vote to approve the municipal budget. You don't approve the state budget. You do by voting in people who make those votes. But you don't go to a box to say, I approve the state budget or I approve the city budget. The only thing you do that for is your local school budget. And it's a heavy task right now. I think when it passes, it's, we kind of hold our breath and hope, and then it happens. But when it doesn't happen and you make $3 million worth of reductions, it's not in the best interest of our community. Again, that's my philosophy. So we're asking people to get out tomorrow to vote. We have tons of other resources. And so what we'd like to do is, in a civil, organized way, give everybody a chance to ask any questions they'd like to ask. If folks need to leave, I appreciate that. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that I can. And if I can't answer it, I will find an answer and try to get it back to you. A couple questions that have come up, and we've started the process. One is what local nonprofits get what dollars to do work in our schools. And there's a difference between invoice things and things we have grant partnerships on. But we actually have a list of hundreds of vendors that we work with, and we started to go through them, but we're also at the end of our fiscal year. So we're trying to tie that out appropriately, and we'll get more information on that back out to folks. The coaches piece has come up a lot. There are 11 coaches in this local budget. We do have some others. They're tied to grants. I think our teachers and educators have spoken very loudly, and my opinion is appropriately to support coaches, and that is being our district to support our staff for lots of reasons. But also it came up that other areas around us don't have coaches. That's actually not accurate. We looked at all of our immediate schools in the area. They all have coach positions in their districts. Are there some out there that might not? Maybe. I just want to make a point that it is considered a best practice that you have them. There are lots of benefits to them. If anybody's been listening, I've said it a lot. I don't want to just keep repeating it, but if anyone here wants to speak to any questions around coaches or fund balance or any other things, I'm happy to do everything I can to answer it. For better or worse, I live this stuff every day, all day. So I think the best way is if we just kind of start on one side, maybe work our way across, or if someone has a time constraint, come on up and ask any questions you have. I'm not going to use a time limit. I want people to be able to say what they feel they need to say and ask what they need to ask. Who wants to go first?
Hi, I'm Steve Morgan. I live at 260 South Avenue, Ward 7. Lived there for 40 years. My kids are grown and gone from school. I have a grandson that is going into his senior year this year. And when he was 14, my wife and I gave him a birthday card, and we wrote my wife wrote the birthday card out. When he opened it, he had to get his mother to read it for him because it was in cursive. And I think that's a crime in itself. I want him to be able to read the original Declaration of Independence. I want him to be able to read millions of other historical notations that he could be able to do if they do that. I think that should be added. In regards to the cut in the school budget right now, I say we don't cut it, we increase it. I know you asked the question, if I remember right. I spoke 2 to 3 weeks ago and got cut off during the time limit because I have a tendency to ramble. But I think that on the questionnaire, someplace in the voting booth, they said, do you believe the budget's too high, too low, or not high enough, or whatever it was? I think that should be almost part of the question, because if it gets voted down again, like it did those 2 to 3, the last couple of times, wouldn't you like to know that some of the people are voting it down, not because it's too high, they're voting it down because it's too low. And I think that needs to be stated. I also want to keep people talking, so I don't want to take up a lot of time. Yeah, I'm glad you started out with themes and goals, and I was thinking how easy it would be, how much easier it would be if you had more money to do those themes and goals, and increase the themes and goals and make them for the benefit of our kids. I think the teachers aren't paid enough. I know what they do. It's second only to being a mom. And I think I'd like to All right, let me start over. My name's Steve Morgan. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, yeah, the themes and goals, I'd love to just see this continue. I want to see the teachers get paid more. I want to see more pencils in the desks, and I want to see the best desks come forward and the best school systems so that we can be proud of it. And I mentioned this the last time I did speak. I've been a real estate broker here for 36 years. And one of the first questions that gets asked to me is, how's the school system? And I don't want to say it's average. I want to say it's great. My brother and I have coached Little League for years and years. This was years ago. We coached it for 9-10 years each. I went to an all-star game that was being played. He coached in the Portland Little League. I coached in Lewiston. Went to an all-star game down there in Falmouth. And they were eating steaks. They were cooking steak sandwiches and all kinds of stuff down there in Falmouth. And we got pixie sticks and red hot dogs. And I'm pretty excited about that in general, but I'd like to see more money on the table. And if you increase my taxes, it won't bother me a bit. And I feel I do have empathy for the people that are on fixed incomes, and I'd like to see them somehow get supplemented to offset that. And that would take more than I could do in this 5 minutes. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Steve.
Is it on?
Yeah, you're good.
Ronnie Parody. I just want to know where the parents are. There's mostly teachers here and stuff like that. What are the parents saying to you? When my child was in special ed, I was in the schools practically every 2 weeks. And my son had one of the best programs in Lewiston High School. Granted, it was back in the 90s. But we met, went to so many IEPs and PETs and all that stuff. But I do not see parents out here cheering on their kids. I do not see it in the schools when I've been substituting. And this is my concern, is that parents are not coming out for this budget. All I'm hearing from is the teachers. And not that, because I work for the Lewiston school system as a substitute. So I know what's going on, and we need to do something to get parents involved, because this is what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Surely there's more.
I will say just from here, why are there 38 to 40 people here when there's 38,000 people in Lewiston, or in Lewiston, I mean, just in Lewiston. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Back to Burr.
Linda Scott, Ward 1. Jake, can you go back to the slide where it said what the mill rate was last year and what it is now for the cost on the taxpayers?
So it's this bottom of this one right now. It's a $1.16 ask. The
And
over,
last year we were $1.34 ask.
yes.
Yes.
So this year's
Okay.
ask has become smaller than last year's.
Correct. And last year at $1.34, I was on the city council last year. I was on the school committee for 6 years. This is lower now than what everybody approved last time. I'm a little confused by that. So basically what we're saying here is that the school budget is now not the cost of the tax increase that everybody's freaking out over, because we are lower now than we were last year. I think that needs to be reiterated over and over again. We cannot afford to lose more in our school system. This room is filled with some of the most dedicated, exceptional staff members and teachers I have ever had the luxury of meeting and working with. And I thank them all for being here tonight. And I think it's shameful that we're in this place where we are taking out the fact that the city budget had to go up, and it did have to go up, because year after year after year for the last, what now, 14 years, since 2008, 12 years, whatever, my math isn't great, sorry. since that time when we were deciding as city councilors that we needed a zero budget because our city can't afford it. We didn't include cost increases each year. We didn't include needs each year. These are things that we need to take care of. Our city needs this. And to take this out on the school budget, a school system that needs all of these things is just, it's horrific in my opinion. I'm ashamed by it. I will be voting yes again, like I did last time. I hope everybody else does. I'll be at the polls tomorrow, by the way, working 2:30 to 9. I hope to see you all there. Come in and vote yes. Support our schools, support our students, support our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Well, we're transitioning. I want to apologize. I've done a town hall budget meeting for years now, and there's usually 3 or less people there. So in the future, we could set up in the bigger room. I apologize. Does everyone have a seat that wants one? Because we can do some more up front here. Okay.
Can you hear me okay? So good evening, Jake. Good evening to the school committee and the school committee members, everyone who made it out tonight, teachers, staff, administrators, everyone. I know that there's probably a sunny, wonderful spot with your family that you'd rather be tonight than to be doing this, but we're here, I personally believe, for the primary reason, which is our kids, our children. Really quickly, I don't know how much time I have, but when I first arrived in Lewiston, Maine in 2013, I was in the depths of substance use disorder. At that time, I actually applied for and got a job at one of the day treatment schools in this community. And it was a wonderful facility. They do great work. They trained me. Sadly, I did not retain that job through my own struggles. However, while I was there, the work that I did, interestingly, when I finally got into sobriety and came to Lewiston Public Schools, my first employment was as a BHP ed tech for the RISE program, which is still active today and doing wonderful work. So I wanted to speak briefly to what Kirsten Crafts was talking about in terms of bringing our students home, our students that are of the highest need, whether it is social, emotional, or more intensive with behavioral issues that can be up to including verbally abusive or even physically aggressive at times, and that can be difficult. It's challenging for a staff member to walk through those challenges, but I have seen RISE and I've seen all of the different schools in our district apply the strategies, the same type of training that I received from that day treatment facility, a private school. What's the acronym? SPPS?
Yeah, special purpose private
Thank
school.
you. Special purpose private school that I worked at before I came to Lewiston Public Schools. And so I firmly support people coming out to vote tomorrow to support the school budget, and also for the understanding that the vision that Jake and others are trying to work through to bring our students home is so important. The least restrictive environment helps our kids to grow. I actually, for the first time this year, taught a functional life skills ELD or multilingual class, and it was amazing to watch these children grow. But not only did they receive those FLS supports, they also were involved in unified sports as well. So I can only imagine what it will be for those smiling faces to come back and be welcomed in, just as they should be. So I'm very adamant about that. I think it's really important. And of course, it will reduce costs as well. And the other thing is that, in my lifetime, I've been through many challenges. One was trying to be a gymnast in high school. I had a great coach. Then I struggled with substance use disorder. I found sobriety, and I also was sponsored by a woman who had followed some other suggested steps. Well, it holds true for here in our professional world that we need people to lead us, to guide us, to give us the tools, the training, everything that we need to be successful. And I will tell you, there is nothing more, I guess, relieving than when you have somebody who shows you, you know what, me too, I've been there too. So I want to thank everyone for giving of their time tonight. Jake, and to the school committee, I do not envy your position one bit, but I know how difficult this is. But I think that we're moving in a better position, but people need to come out and vote. And to the parents, you know what? I will never be a parent. I'm an ovarian cancer survivor, but I'll tell you what, every one of those young people
is in some way or less a child that I want to help to grow and to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Matthew Egring, Ward 4. Why are we sending our kids to special purpose schools that can't meet all their needs, that we then have to meet their needs? Wouldn't it be better to keep those kids in-house and send other children? Because if we can't meet their needs down there, we can't meet their IEP. If their parents decide they're going to go to court, it's going to cost us way more money. If the schools can't support the kids, why are they going there?
So typically it's they intend to support those IEP items, but they can't hire a position. And because it's in their IEP, we're obligated to find a way to provide it.
Right, but why would we send them there if they don't have the support system?
Just because typically they do, they pledge to provide those supports. But if a speech therapist change positions in the middle of the year, we get a phone call. If a student has an IEP for speech therapy and it's not available, and then we have to try to provide that. So we don't send them knowing they're not going to provide all these services. We send them to places where they are trying to provide them, but if they fall short, we are obligated to provide them. Like, I wish they were obligated to.
Aren't they,
provide them.
shouldn't they be the ones obligated to provide it if they're taking our kids?
One would wish. I'm with you on it. We are their school record and we are the ones responsible. Not only, like, to your point, not only is that the expectation or the obligation that we do our best to fulfill. We've actually seen some litigation where students didn't get what they felt they needed at the special purpose private school. And if there's any question from a legality perspective, the lawsuit ends up on our doorstep.
Uh-huh. And it's gonna come back hard.
Can I just say something about sending kids out? My son had to be sent out.
Ronnie, do you mind just coming up? Because I know people are watching online that couldn't get here in person. Yeah, thank you.
I think sometimes you have to send kids out. My son had to be sent out. Granted, it was in the 90s because the teachers in Lewiston said they could not handle him and give him the education he needed. Okay, so he was sent out to Spurwink and everything, and he got a good education at Spurwink. He wanted to come back to regular school, and he was intelligent enough to know that. And he did, and when he was in the 6th grade, said, I want to go back to Lewiston. And we had a program where we had him do drama here, half day and half day at Spurwink. I mean, every other day. Anyway, he finally was mainstreamed his freshman year in high school, and he graduated 10th of the class of 98 of Lewiston High School. And that's, and it was thanks to the special programming that Lewiston school system was able to give him, but he did have to go out for a while. And we didn't want him to go out because we adopted him. And when he was 6 years old and stuff, but it was the school system that said they couldn't handle him in the classroom. I just want people to know, because sometimes you do have to send kids out.
Yeah, it is appropriate sometimes to have kids be in a different setting. And I think we know those students pretty well. We also have situations where sometimes families deny that, even though we think they might be better served in a different setting. So we work through those too. But I think at the end of the day, we want what's best for the student. And I would agree that we'll still need some outplaced spots, but I do think we can reduce how much we're spending by bringing those that we can properly provide for, bring them back home. Other thoughts, concerns, questions? Anybody waiting for the last question? If there are no other questions or those who want to bring anything up. Oh, we have one.
Better late than never, right?
Your timing is perfect, actually.
We're on. My name is Michael Roy, Ward 4 City Councilor. I just want to thank everybody in this room. I think it's very important that we come out and show our support to the kids, the teachers, everybody. I mean, I voted yes personally the last 2 times, and I also put that the budget was too low. You know, I feel kids are our investment. We need to invest in our kids. I ran for city council on education. You know, and one of the reasons that I ran for city council was to, you know, put money back into education, because every year we're cutting the budget. Whenever the budget needs to be cut, it's the education piece. And I was hoping to make a difference. And I really, really encourage everybody to invest in our kids. And I think it's very important. We've got dedicated teachers. We've got the best teachers that we can actually buy right now. And we're not paying them anything. You know, a lot of teachers I personally know are here early mornings, late at night. They're investing in our youth. We need to invest in our youth. We need to invest in our kids. So I think, you know, I'm hoping that everybody stands up that can get out to vote. And if you can't, I would love to help in any way that I can. You know, if you need a ride to the polls, I mean, I would love to give you a ride to the polls. I mean, I would really love to do this, and I want everybody to invest in our kids. So I just want to thank everybody in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? A question that you've heard somebody else ask that you want to have shared publicly? Okay, seeing none. I'll hang out for a bit if someone wants to ask a individualized personal question without the mics on and the camera on. And short of that, I hope everyone who's a Lewiston resident shows up at Longley tomorrow between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy schedules in the beautiful afternoon, evening.